Hey there, it's Lara here with your weekly Witchy Wednesday astrology forecast for the week of September 11th to 17th, 2019. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I so appreciate your interactions. I really hope that if what I say here resonates with you, that you let me know by either leaving a comment, asking a question, hitting the like button on the video, and subscribing to the channel, sharing with people that you think might be interested in what I'm saying here, all of that. So in this video, we're going to really focus on the full moon in Pisces that's happening this Friday or Saturday, depending where you live. And the overall message, as I understand it, intuit it, feel it, see it, all of those things, is one of integration, ultimately. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that as we move along here. But in true Pisces fashion, and because of the fact that Neptune is sitting square on my natal sun at 17 degrees Pisces, and oh boy, it's been an interesting experience this year. Neptune moves really slowly, right? So it stays in one place for quite a long time. And yesterday, this was all exactly opposite the sun in Virgo. Sun's in Virgo right now. So, anyway, to make a long story short, and without blathering on too much about myself, I'm having a hard time articulating my words, putting my thoughts into coherent communication with you. And that is the nature of Neptune and of Pisces, right? It's this unspoken communication that happens. Pisces doesn't really need words to communicate. It's very intuitive energy, and sort of like the unspoken messages are often louder and more real to Pisces than what's coming out here. And so this has been challenging for me. It's been challenging. I've been, really desperately wanting to write and having a really difficult time doing that. It comes in fits and spurts, and inspiration, which is also very Piscean and Neptunian, right? And we'll talk about that when we talk about the full moon here too, because there's a piece of the puzzle that has to do with that. But you had to take action on that inspiration. And this full moon can actually help with that, which sounds kind of weird and counterintuitive because it's a full moon in Pisces, not normally associated with taking action. But ultimately, as I said, it is about integration and integrating, because it's on this axis of Virgo Pisces, right? Integrating the spiritual Pisces with the earthly Virgo. That's the ultimate wholeness, right? You've probably heard the expression, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. It maybe sounds a bit cliche at this point because it's been used so much, that expression, but it ultimately is true, and it's really reflective of the energy of this full moon. And so I will talk more about that as we go along here. But before I do, I want to let you know that today, as I'm recording this, the moon is in Aquarius, and it's moving into Pisces on Friday the 13th, which is really not scary at all. And I'll speak to that just briefly in a second. And then the moon is entering Aries on later on Saturday evening, and then Taurus on Tuesday. And so depending where you live, this full moon will take place either on Friday the 13th, late at night, just before midnight, or, well, it sort of depends on what time zone you're in, but it will happen before midnight, or on Saturday the 14th, just after midnight, right? And so I'm Eastern Standard Time Zone, and that's what I use. So you can adjust accordingly. And the full moon is happening for me in my area, for us at 12:33 a.m., so just after midnight on Saturday, September 14th. And the moon will reach fullness at 21 degrees of Pisces. And then the sun is opposite the chart in Virgo at 21 degrees Virgo, right? Because a full moon is always sun and a moon opposite the sky, each other. And just to talk more about that piece, full moons, so again, sun and moon opposite the sky, each other, they are connected to the energy of masculine and feminine, right? Sun and moon. And that's on an energetic level. I don't mean men and women necessarily. Masculine energy, feminine energy, which resides in all of us, right? Whether we choose to recognize that or not, but it does. And so this can be a call at the time of a full moon to balance those things, those energies in whatever area of the chart it's playing out, those yin and yang energies, right? The sun being a yang energy, a sort of like driven outward energy, and the moon being more of a receptive inward energy. So at a full moon is a time when excuse me, things culminate, they come to fruition. Think about, the moon is growing and then it reaches its fullest point, right? So reaching sort of like a fever pitch, full illumination, full insight. It can be an ending, the ending of a cycle, right? I mean, technically, ultimately, that's kind of like the dark moon right before the moon becomes new, but we're at the climax of the cycle. That's a better way to put it, actually. And so, and a full moon is often a time of heightened emotions, because the moon rules our emotions and the ebbs and flows of our emotions, right? Just as it rules the tides. And so when we have a full moon, people can be extra emotional. We can be prone to lunacy. Luna, right, is the root word of lunacy, and that means moon. And so we can get a little over the top, emotionally speaking. And so we just, when we have an awareness of that and we're mindful of it, then we can use those heightened emotions to our benefit ultimately, rather than just kind of, letting them spill out all over the place on other people and in a harmful, hurtful way. Sometimes emotions do need to spill. At the time of a full moon, we need to have a good cry. There's some kind of like emotional release that is begging to happen, and that's perfectly okay. But try to do that in a way where it's like, watch a sad movie, listen to some music that maybe makes you feel, like you can let it out, sort of thing. Those sorts of things, and or have a real heart to heart with somebody that you're close to, that you feel safe with. So full moons can also often highlight relationships in our lives, because they are connected to that energy of masculine, feminine, right? And so that sometimes happens around the time of a full moon. And in relation to this specific full moon, it's happening on the Pisces Virgo axis, as I mentioned. So again, Pisces is is connected to the spiritual realms, right? Pisces is a water sign, a very sensitive water sign, lacking boundaries often, feeler of all the feels, very compassionate, empathetic, dreamy, um, craving sort of union with the divine. Um, and Virgo is this grounded earth energy, right? About the practical details and about the connection to nature and the natural world, to the physical realms. And so this is this axis, you've heard me say before, of practical magic, of the spiritual and the material. And when you think of the symbol of Pisces, right, it's two fish swimming in the opposite directions, but they are tethered together by this cord, this silver cord. And those two fish are representative of like the higher and lower realms, of the physical and the spiritual, the material world and the spiritual world, right? Spiritual beings having a human experience. And we need to take both of those things into consideration. And this full moon, I feel, is a time of integrating those things in our life. So, a real coming together in wholeness in some way. You know, to integrating and making a connection between how what we do on a day-to-day reality, physical, material reality, is connected to and reflected in our physical health, our spiritual health, emotional, mental, this kind of thing. It's all connected, right? Pisces Virgo is often referred to as the axis of health as well. The physical health, the health of our physical being, and the spiritual health, so it's like emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, all coming together in wholeness. So it's like if we are just completely focused on the quote unquote real world, right? Like the physical reality, material life. We may be a person who is really striving, like, nose to the grindstone, always, working, to make the money, to do the things, to buy the stuff, to running around with the kids everywhere. It's sort of all about, if we're just living in this, like, this is all there is, like this physical plane is all there is, and then we die, and then whatever kind of thing. There's no meaning there, and then we can become disillusioned, which is also Piscean quality, and we can escape into things like drugs, alcohol, any kind of addictions, even like sort of greed, narcissism. Oh my goodness. We can end up with this sense of sort of hopelessness. And when a person is hopeless, like, nothing has meaning. And so that's really difficult. And so, but on the flip side, there are those people who spend all their time in la la land, right? For lack of a better expression, or who are just like, like they've taken it too far, and they think that life in this physical existence means nothing, and is they don't have to take care of business, and they're somehow superior if they, choose to move off to an ashram for 3 years and, you know, just completely disengage from the material world. And there's many other examples I could use. So, but my point is, the point I'm trying to make here is that there needs to be a balance of both of these things, right? In order for us to live optimally and to feel like whole, integrated beings who are, you may have heard the phrase like living in the world, but not of it. So, not so attached to the striving and the material gain and the one-upmanship and the competition and the focus on like the obsessive things we do as humans, right? Like, the not being completely focused on our physical reality, even our physical body, but not completely ignoring that either, right? And vice versa. Not being like just focused on our dreams to the point of delusion or, our connection with spirit or our, like not being so focused on our spiritual life that we're ignoring material reality. There has to be a balance of both. And ultimately, I see that this full moon is drawing our attention to the need to balance those things and to integrate the lessons that we've learned perhaps, over this Virgo season, and beyond, right? Astrology is cycles within cycles. So integrating some lessons perhaps that we have learned, over this last while, over this last phase of our lives even, and using those to find some balance between our physical reality and our spiritual reality, and to be ultimately whole and healthy in every way. And it doesn't mean that that's going to happen overnight and that all the pieces are going to fall into place like that, this requires some diligence, some dreaming and doing, right? Pisces, Virgo, some inspiration, and some actual action. And thankfully, we have the presence of Mars during the time of this full moon. I'm going to show you the chart now, I think. So here we've got the moon. This is drawn up for the actual time of the full moon in Pisces. In my time, like I said, Saturday the 14th, 12:33 a.m. So here's the moon in Pisces at 21 degrees. Neptune's at 17, right? Sitting on my sun, like I said. But moon is at 21 degrees at the time of the full moon, and the sun is at 21 degrees Virgo, opposite the chart. And right beside Virgo is Mars at 17 degrees, right? Which is opposite Neptune. And then we've got Venus and Mercury still in Virgo at the time of the full moon, but just about to move into Libra. And so this also marks this, this highlights the culmination because it's the ending of a cycle. And later on the same day of the full moon, Venus and Mercury will move into Libra. And then we have, which I spoke about a bit last week, Jupiter in Sagittarius here, which is squaring Neptune in Pisces, squaring the sun here and the full moon. And then, of course, we have Pluto, South Node, and Saturn up here in Capricorn. But these powerful planets that are hearkening in change and transformation and the breaking down of the old in order to build a new, more solid foundation, and all those things you've heard me talk about in relation to what's happening with Saturn and Pluto, getting closer and closer together and meeting up in January of 2020. So it's coming, right? But these planets are in positive conversation with this full moon, sextiling the full moon, trining the sun here. And so ultimately, this is lending some support for positive change, transformation, the rebalance of power, the ability to really create something long lasting and transformative. So sorry, I'm just having a think here for a second about what I want to focus on before I get into to going through each of the signs. Oh, I know what it is. It's the Mars piece that I was talking about before I showed you the chart. So Mars is in close conversation with this full moon. And Mars is helping us if we choose to use the energy of Mars in the best way possible, the most sort of helpful way possible, which is to help us take action on our inspiration, to help us action our dreams, to give us the drive and the will to move through difficult emotions, to take back our power, to balance the power dynamics in our lives potentially, to potentially take some action on healing as well, because this is the axis of healing, right? And to balance our wellness, right? Like if we are in balance physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, we're healthy, we're whole. But on the flip side, Mars can be an energy of aggression, of impulsiveness, of reactiveness, very warrior like. And although that can be a positive thing, it can also be this kind of ragey kind of energy, right? And because it's a full moon and it's an emotional time, we just have to be mindful not to let our emotions get the better of us and to lash out. Notice. It's very healthy to notice when something triggers you. But then to use that to say, oh, what's that about, right? Like so and so just said this to me, or I just got this email, or I just saw this, or I just read that, or this, I just encountered this person, or whatever it may be. That triggered me emotionally some way. It really like riled me up, or it just, there's like a jolt almost. And so like, be curious about that. What's that about? And rather than reacting in the moment, knee-jerk reaction, lashing out impulsively, use that Mars energy to take action to resolve that tension, that like, what is this about, and why am I feeling this way, and what can I do to resolve that feeling? And also, like I said, the Mars energy lending us support for taking action on some other things as well. The last thing I want to talk about before I get to talking, addressing each of the signs, is the involvement of Pluto in this full moon. Because at the time of the full moon, the sun and the moon are in almost exact conversation, positive conversation with Pluto, because Pluto's at 20 degrees Capricorn, right? And the sun is at 21 degrees Virgo, so trining the the Pluto energy. And then the moon is at 21 degrees Pisces, sextiling the Pluto energy, right? So those are conversations of opportunity, of ease, of flow, of support, ultimately, if we take the action. It doesn't just fall from the sky, right? And Pisces can have that tendency to just go, oh, everything will work out, and I'll just dream about it and it'll happen. And I'm a Pisces sun. I'm not making fun of anybody here. That's thankfully I'm a Virgo rising, so I do have that impetus to do the work for the most part. But anyway, my point is that Pluto's in powerful, positive conversation. Pluto is that energy of transformation, of getting to the bottom of things to purge the toxins. It is about power and control, and ultimately authentic power, right? Not the power of, not externalizing power, not having power over somebody else because you think you're better than them, or higher than them, or richer than them, or hotter than them, or whatever it is, right? Stronger than them, whatever. You have more education than them, you're whatever it is, all these things that we see and that how people use power, misuse power, more accurately. Pluto is about our self-agency. We have power and control ultimately over ourselves, right? And when people are operating from that place of authentic power, they do not manipulate others. They do not take advantage of others. They do not hold their wealth and their pedigree and whatever else over others. But Pluto ultimately is this energy of transformation. The phoenix rising from the ashes, right, is the archetype of Pluto. And one thing I learned when I was looking into this full moon is that Neptune and the sun in Pisces are actually sitting in the constellation in the sky known as the phoenix. And so I feel like this is like the universe going, hey, pay attention to Pluto here. Pay attention to this piece of the puzzle. It's important. And so, we have the power to be the phoenix rising from the ashes, to take whatever potentially has been difficult for us and use that to fuel our growth and evolution and all of that, and to ultimately be the power and the authority, right, of our own selves. So I think I'm going to leave it there. There's a lot of other things I could say here, but I think that is adequate. And we're going to now address each of the signs. And please do listen to the introduction, because that's really where all the juicy bits are. And that gives you all, it gives you the foundation for everything else, because especially when I just do a one-part video, I don't have a ton of time to speak at length about the specifics. And I can never really, you can never really know the specifics. The best way to or the most powerful way and most accurate way, to look at that is to see your own birth chart. You can draw up your own birth chart for free online at various sites. Astro.com is one of them. Or if you get a reading with me or another astrologer, you'll have your birth chart. And when I do readings for people, 99% of my readings are done via audio recording, which works really well for my clients and for me. And I always, if I've never read for you before, I give you a little Astrology 101 lesson off at the start of the reading. So it allows you to understand your birth chart better, like what you're looking at, and to have that foundation. So anyway, when you're listening to these general forecasts, first and foremost, listen to your rising sign. Because in a general forecast, that can be the most telling, the most obvious, the most accurate. Because I don't know your specifics, like what house your sun is in, for example. But also listen to your sun sign and your moon sign. Or if you don't know your rising sign, then please, by all means, listen to your sun sign. That will give you some information. But if you listen for all three of those, it's a fuller picture in a general way, because these are general forecasts of what's going on for you. So again, just segue into each of the signs. The full moon is about integrating, ultimately the human and the spiritual aspects of ourselves. It's about recognizing yourself as whole and complete, a whole and complete being who is part of the collective, right? We're all connected, but we are whole unto ourselves. And about understanding that this life is just not about the daily grind, right? There's ultimately purpose to our existence here. Don't lose sight of that. Have faith, but put in the work, right? Balancing these things. So where is this full moon in Pisces happening for you, for each of you? We're going to start with Pisces because it's happening in your sign, Pisces, in your first house of your physical vitality, of your physical appearance, of your approach, your instinctual approach to the world, of how the world perceives you, the impression that you make, kind of. So Pisces. Something is reaching a climax in this area of your life. And you may be integrating some lessons that you've learned that will ultimately serve this first house area, right? And this axis of the first and the seventh house, because the seventh house is opposite the first, right? So this is the axis of self, first house, and other, seventh house. And so this may involve relationships. This may ultimately involve your relationship to yourself. And bringing those things into balance, being kinder to yourself, spending an equal amount of time on your own well-being as you do on the well-being of others. Understanding that you are both a spiritual being, which Pisces tends to have quite a solid understanding of, but that this physical realm also matters, and that maybe if you've been ignoring your physical wellness and that kind of thing, it's time to address that and to understand that optimally, we want to take care of both of those things, right? Our human selves and our soul selves, or our spiritual selves. So I think I'm going to leave that there, Pisces. And if you have, questions or comments, please leave those below, and I'll definitely address those. We're going to move on to Aquarius now, where we've got the full moon in your second house. So this is the house of your resources. Resources can include money, time, energy, your material possessions, these kinds of things, right? The skills and talents that you use to support yourself, right? To make money, to that kind of thing, to gain security in this physical reality kind of thing. But it also has to do with what you value, what are your core values, and ultimately what you see as your worth, so your self-worth. So Aquarius, there is something reaching a culmination here, and it may be quite emotional with this being a Pisces full moon, right? Regarding these second house things that I just spoke to you about, and perhaps a need for balancing that second house, whatever's happening in the second house for you, with the eighth house stuff that's across the sky at the time of this full moon, which is other people's resources. And how you are, in these sort of intimate, vulnerable relationships, with things that are buried in the deep kind of psyche. And there may be some psychological kind of healing on some level happening for you regarding your resources and your worth. But something's reaching a culmination ultimately, a crisis point. And when I say crisis, please don't think that to mean like something bad, right? It's just like it's reaching the climax, right? Its fullest point. And so Aquarius, I'm going to leave that there for you. Please listen to the intro. That really gives you the foundation for everything else. And I am going to move on to Capricorn now, where we have the full moon sitting in the third house of your immediate environment, of your daily communications, emails, phone calls, text messages, face-to-face conversations, communicating and writing, speaking, those kinds of things. Your thoughts and thought processes, that can include your self-talk, right? Maybe a lot of that going on during Virgo season, Capricorn. And your immediate environment also includes the people in your immediate environment. So like your peers, your neighbors, your siblings, that sort of thing on that level. And with a full moon happening here, something's reaching a fever pitch. Something's reaching fullness, illumination, culmination, fruition, or, is up for release, letting go, ending, that sort of thing. And ultimately, Capricorn, keep in mind this, the bigger picture of integration, of integrating your more spiritual self with your material human self, right? Capricorn has kind of a spiritual side that not a lot of people recognize or really understand or take note of. But maybe it's time, Capricorn, for you to connect with that more deeply and to articulate that, right? This being in the third house of communication. And so I'm going to leave that there, Capricorn, and move on to Sagittarius, where we've got the full moon happening in your fourth house of home and family and your foundations and your place of living. This can have to do with real estate even. It can have to do with like connection with the mother, nurturing figures. So something's coming to a culmination point there, Sagittarius. Coming up for release, for letting go, for, something's ending, some cycle is ending here, or there's some kind of like, just a reaching a full point. And, it may be an emotional time in this area because it's a Pisces full moon. But keep in mind all those things that I said during the intro, and that can really help you navigate this. But ultimately integrating your spiritual and physical, the spiritual and physical sides of yourself in relation to this fourth house area. Hopefully that makes sense to you, Sag. If you have any questions, ask them below, okay? So moving on to Scorpio, where we've got the full moon happening in your fifth house of your creative self-expression, what sparks joy for you, your children, children you're associated with. So something's reaching a culmination point, coming to fruition, being illuminated, a needing let go of, emotional catharsis, these kinds of things, right? At a full moon. And so ultimately it's about recognizing that you are both a human flesh and blood, being, and that yes, there is work to do on the physical plane, but you are also a spiritual being, and you need to have that side of yourself fulfilled as well. And there may be some inspiration in your creative work happening for you around this time too, Scorpio, because of that, the Pisces full moon in the fifth. So I'm going to leave that there, Scorpio, and I'm going to move on to Libra, where we've got the full moon happening in your sixth house of the daily grind. And maybe the daily grind's been feeling like a real grind over Virgo season, Libra, because you've really been, taking care of a lot of details and doing a lot of work potentially. And maybe there is a sense that, is this all there is, or there has to be more to this, or like a sort of like lacking meaning. Your day to day, whatever it is you do on the day to day, may be lacking meaning, and you need sort of an injection of spirituality there. And by that I mean, like, maybe it is this full moon is drawing to your attention the need for bringing some higher meaning into the work that you do on the day to day. And so that really seems to be the overall message that's coming through for you, Libra. And I do encourage you to listen to the intro. This could also be something reaching a culmination point in terms of your health and wellness and the routines surrounding that as well. So something coming to fruition or illumination there. So we're going to speak to Virgo now, where we've got this full moon, Virgo, happening in your 7th house of one-to-one relationships. So something may reach a culmination point, an illumination, a fever pitch, an emotional release, a letting go, that kind of thing, in terms of a one-to-one relationship, right? Whether that be a business partnership, a close friendship, or close connection with a family member, or like a significant other, a marriage partner, that kind of thing. And maybe there's a recognition that there needs to be an element of connecting with that other person on more than just kind of like a day-to-day physical reality, paying the bills, doing the work way. There needs to be a more kind of a deeper, more spiritual connection fostered there. So that's for you, Virgo. Moving on to Leo, where we've got the full moon happening in your 8th house, Leo. The house of other people's money, other people's resources, time, money, energy, that kind of thing. And deep psychological healing as well, right? Intimate, deep, dark, secretive things in the 8th house. And so, Leo, something is reaching an emotional catharsis there, an illumination coming to fruition. On a very mundane level, this could be like you getting some kind of a payout for your taxes or something like that, or your insurance or something. Or an inheritance or something, but it could also be on a very deep sort of emotional, psychological level, that something's being released here in relation to this sort of 8th house, right? And a realization that there may be sort of more spiritual underlying reasons for for your state of wellness, even. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Leo. Please listen to the intro for more. And I'm going to move on to Cancer now, where we have the full moon happening in your 9th house of your worldview, your philosophy, your belief system. This can have to do with teaching and learning and travel as well, right? Things we learn through foreign cultures and experience in that way. And so, Cancer, something's coming to fruition, up for release, reaching a culmination point, being illuminated. And it may be emotional, because you are also a water sign, so you're deeply impacted by the moon. It is your ruling planet. And this full moon is in Pisces, another water sign, very emotional. So maybe an emotional time, and sort of in relation to those 9th house, to something 9th house related, right? And this could even involve communication on some level. So, Cancer, please listen to the intro, because it really will give you a greater understanding and give you some context about what I'm talking about here. So I'm moving on to Gemini now, where we've got the full moon happening in your 10th house of the legacy you wish to leave, of your ultimate calling here on earth, your relationship to authority and authority figures and your own authority. And it can also have to do with your career as well. So something's reaching a fruition, an ending, a culmination, an illumination. And it could be quite emotional because this is a Pisces full moon in that arena, in that 10th house arena, right? And it could be like, it could have a spiritual impact on you in some way, Gemini. And I think that's all I'm going to say about that. Please listen to the introduction. It will give you further context and insight. Taurus, the full moon is happening for you in your 11th house of groups, associations, friendships, people walking the same path as you in life, your hopes and dreams for the future. And so this may be an emotional time surrounding those things at the time of the full moon for you. And ultimately, maybe making some connections with groups, spiritual groups, or groups that feel like they are, related to you on that spiritual plane, even, Taurus, if that makes sense for you. And so please do listen to the intro, Taurus, for more talk about integrating the spiritual and the material at this time. And I'm going to move on now to speak to Aries. Last but not least, Aries. The full moon is happening in your 12th house of the unseen, of what goes on behind closed doors, of how you spend time in solitude and rest and reflection. And so this can be an emotional time for you, and maybe something that's not being seen by the outer world. This is going on internally for you and in a very private way. It's possible. Or you're really communicating with spirit right now, Aries. And maybe, you are somehow tapping into that wisdom for yourself. So I'm going to leave that there. Please listen to the introduction for context. And I really do appreciate you hanging out with me here. And I will catch you in next week's video, okay?